Golden Gate Breakfast Club. This morning we have a real treat. We have Lisa Louie. That's a French pronunciation. Lisa shares Northern California hikes on her website, hikingautism.com. Lisa learned to love the outdoors as a child, hiking and camping in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. She went to college in Massachusetts and lived in Japan for several years. Lisa is a Japanese technical translator by profession, and Lisa now lives in San Francisco with her husband and two sons. She has a son that has been severely challenged by autism and became almost housebound, along with the rest of the family, due to the extreme sensory processing issues he possessed. Hard work and gifted teachers helped Sean get back in the world by hiking in nature, making his life better for him and his whole family. Lisa's weekly insights posts encourage readers to get up, get out, and keep putting one foot forward. She is currently working on a book to inspire others to use nature as a positive force dealing with life challenges. Members and guests of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, let's give a warm welcome to Lisa Louie.
Thank you so much, Craig. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. When Craig first approached me to maybe give a talk, because he had found me through the website when he was looking for a walk for your group, nothing makes me happier than hearing that somebody was actually using the site to find a hike to take people on. So that made me very happy, and it's really great to be here. I enjoyed attending a meeting earlier so I could kind of get a sense of how the group worked. And at that time, hopefully nobody remembers, but my office is in my attic, which looks like a hoarder house disaster area. So yeah, with the having lived in Japan background, I have my Japanese shoji screen blocking out some of the hoarder house attic background. And I also see Patricia and Derek. I see the London and the British connection. I have the two sons. My younger son is Sean, who's severely autistic, but my older son, who's in his late 20s, was recently offered an opportunity through his company to live in London. So he's now living in London, and I'm very much hoping to visit him soon. It's very exciting. And then I remember, again, having grown up in upstate New York, I remember, and I don't know if it was Betty or somebody else in here was an upstate New Yorker. I remember that from the previous meeting. And then I'm hearing Marin is one of my favorite places to hike. And then the Richmond district, sunshine. I'm sitting here in the Richmond district, and we definitely had one of the sunniest, most summery days we've had in a very long time yesterday. So we're enjoying an actual summertime at the coast right here at Ocean Beach. It gets very foggy. So thank you to Craig. Thank you to the club. Thank you to Susan Rowan for coordinating through the committee. Very much appreciated. Thank you. It's very nice interacting with Susan. So today what I would like to do is I'm going to share a presentation. So I have my share screen button, but I don't know if someone has to make me host to do that. I might be able to just do it without being made host. Should I just try that? Let me see. I'll give it a try. So you please bear with me. I do look at my notes a bit for my talk, but I have a share screen button. So I'm going to see if that works without having the host being passed on. So let's see if this works. It looks like it might. Okay, so I'm going to share this. Okay, so hopefully, can everybody see? I'm just going to look for hands waving. Can you see that? Okay, so yeah, I'll just give you a little, try to be practical here. There's 12 slides. I might run an average of 2 minutes per slide. It will be, the talk part will be done in 20 some minutes. And I will read from notes as I go though, because as much as I like to talk, even I get stuck sometimes. So when we're done, I look forward to any questions anyone has. So again, I appreciate Craig's very kind introduction. And as he said, my day job to pay the bills is I work as a Japanese technical translator. Most of my time, my days are spent sitting in front of Japanese patents.
Hey, Lisa, can you switch to slideshow?
Oh, let me see.
It's right there.
You know, now I've got my, hang on a second. I've got my, here we go. Let's see.
There it is.
So is that better though? Because now we're seeing my
No.
slideshow heading.
From the beginning. Clear
Okay,
run of it.
let's see if that'll go. Set slideshow and then start. Okay, let's see if I can get that to go to.
Click on the first thing on the left that
play
says
from
play
start.
from the start.
Okay, and then, but if I do, oh, then I didn't want it to go automatically. There we go. Thank you very much. That's better. Okay, so again, so my day job, which pays the bills, is working as a translator, and my labor of love, of course, my two sons and my, take care of my family. But the whole hikingautism.com and working with the autism community is the labor of love part of my job. And again, I put this website out just as something I do on the side. So it makes me very happy when somebody finds it and uses it to find a hiker to get some uplifting notes from it. So because I started this hiking autism website, the people from the local autism society contacted me and asked me if I would start leading hikes for other families affected by autism in the Bay Area. And that's been a great pleasure. I'll mention that a little bit again at the end. But yes, the things we do as a labor of love in life can sometimes open up really wonderful things in our lives. So the theme for today is just get to the trailhead, and why spending time in nature is helpful for all of us. And to me, I think that sounds like a very simple idea. It's like, well, who doesn't understand that spending a little time in nature would be good for us? And it is a simple idea. But I think that simple thing of spending time in nature can have really profound effects on people and profound benefits, which it did for my severely autistic son. So I'll share his example of why I think it's so helpful. But I think that the simple act of spending a little bit more time in nature can have profound benefits for all of us. So that's the theme for today, and walk you through a little story. Let's see, we go to. So as time has, oh, wait a minute, I think we skipped one here. So the big issue, we could talk about this from any perspective, but I like to think about stress and stress in modern life. There are a lot of reasons why spending time in things that nature can help us with, but it can help us relieve stress. And why is stress such a big deal? I had the honor of participating as a subject in a UCSF medical study years ago. Nobel Prize winner Elizabeth Blackburn, who's a British geneticist, and Alyssa Epple, who's a researcher here at UCFS in San Francisco, decided to do some research about the effects of extreme and chronic stress, and to see if high levels of stress without relief could actually physically change us. And in our DNA, there's a component called telomeres. And so you can see the title of this book that the two of them eventually put out is The Telomere Effect. And as it turns out, high extreme levels of stress can actually shorten your telomere strands, which is a reflection of the length and quality of your life. And so they needed subjects to study for like a 2-year medical study. And they needed people who lived very, very high stress lives at a relentless level. And who did they choose? They chose mothers of autistic children, because it really is a very high stress situation, whether you have a child who is severely challenged like my son is, or, and I'm sure everyone here, all I ever hear people say is, oh, my grandkid or my niece or nephew or my neighbor's kid. Seems like almost all of us know someone who has been affected by autism because it's become so prevalent in recent years. So anyways, they did studies of mothers of autistic children. They tracked us over a couple of years. They would measure our cortisol levels, how we were sleeping, how was our cognitive function, what was our disease susceptibility. And every time you'd go in for tests for this study, they would literally take 22 or 23 vials of blood. That was a really intense study, and they were actually studying DNA strands and everything. So this studying about stress, I think, is an important thing because it does affect our lives. And in recent years, even pre-pandemic, but particularly in the pandemic, the percentage of the population, and it's not just in the United States, but of course we see this in the US, but it's around the world, the percentage of people suffering from anxiety and depression is just skyrocketing. If you know anybody between the ages of 15 and 45, the percentage of anxiety and depression is just like a lump. It's a very high, just about any kid who's gone to college, like half the college kids are off to the counselors, because it is just, I think modern life has really become more stressful and people are dealing with a lot more anxiety and depression. So we need things to help address this is my sense. So having worked with these researchers, and they came out with this terrific book, it is scary what stress and anxiety and depression can do to us. And again, during the pandemic, we've seen this more. We hear our friends, our parents, our kids, our neighbors talk about feeling out of sorts and depressed because life has changed in ways that are really tougher for people to deal with. And so, but I always like to say there's always a way to make things at least a little bit better. And so for me, because this worked for my family and my son, I like to share the benefits of just getting some time in nature, which for us was a tough thing to do. So the thought of less nature means more stress. I chose a picture of kids playing outdoors because as an upstate New Yorker, my childhood was spent, we had about 6 months of cold, snowy time. So when my mom said, go play outdoors, the only restriction was, if it got to be minus 15 or below, we would be told to stay in. But other than that was go outside and play. And the other photo here is somebody's shelf full of electronic gadgets. My garage has been filled 20 times over with a set of gadgets like this. They all get out of date. Sometimes we're using that many items at the same time. And I think technology is great, but it's come to overwhelm us a bit. TV was invented in the 1930s when my dad was born in 1936. By the 1940s, there were only a few thousand TV sets floating around in the United States. But when you hit the 1950s, boom, TVs in homes had exploded. And that was the time when mothers started yelling at their kids to go outside and play and get off the TV. TV became more and more prevalent as time went forward into when we got to the 60s and 70s, it really became a bigger force where kids were spending a lot of time sitting in front of the TV, and you'd have news stories about it. But we went beyond the TV situation, where when we hit the 1980s, there was even less time with kids playing outdoors because computer games and consoles started coming into the picture. And so, kids really did have a lot more activity they could do at home. And it is an easier thing as a parent to, let the kids play with something. And I'm sure all of us parents have tried to get our kids to do other activities, but with it right there, when we go up into the 1990s and we hit the smartphones, and in 2007, when Apple came out with the iPhone, that was the end of everything. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't spend a lot of time with their face in front of a small screen. And so the more time we spend like that, the less time we're spending outdoors, maybe just interacting face to face. Here we all are today on Zoom, because we need to. This is great. I think Zoom is great because during the pandemic, it helped us. And for me, as a mother of an autistic child, my life is very restricted. So it is hard for me to get out and see people or go to meetings live even if I'd like to. So I think Zoom and technology are wonderful things. But I flip back to a memory of my dad, again, born in 36, spent his childhood playing in the 40s and into the 50s. And at that time, Western movies, cowboy and Indian films were the big thing. Now, I guess it's probably not politically correct to say cowboys and Indians, but at the time, that's what kids played when my dad was a kid. Flip up into the 1960s when my brothers and I were playing outdoors, we were still playing the same thing because TV shows were cowboys and Indian Western shows. So after that point, though, that sort of easy outdoor play was just not as easy to come by. Because it's the only thing. My older son, who's in London, he works for a computer game company. So he doesn't like it when I say anything bad about technology, but I'm not saying it's bad. I love technology, but I think it is easy for us to get sucked in and not spend time doing other things. So that, I think, is one effect that keeps us from spending some of the time outdoors that we might. And years ago, I think this book shown here, Last Child in the Woods, I think that was first published, it was in the mid 2000, like 2004 or maybe 2007, sometime around then, when my kids were already kind of elementary school and growing up. I saw that title and it really scared me, because my childhood was spent in the middle of nowhere in the Mohawk Valley, in the foothills of the Adirondacks. We did not have anything to do except run around exploring the creeks and the fields and the forests. And it was a very formative part of my life. And I remember it being a great solace to spend that time outdoor. And I think it's an important part of our development as people, and also connecting with each other. So when I saw the title of that book, I was like, oh my gosh, nature deficit disorder, what a scary thought. And there have been tons of books and papers and stories along this theme since that time, but this title caught me back at that time, which is now, maybe 15 years ago. During the years since then, we actually literally have doctors prescribing on their little prescription notes, or in your online, medical notes, prescribing nature walks to patients. That this is something that doctors have felt people have been missing, and that it would be helpful for people with various conditions and situations. And they're actually literally prescribing nature walks to patients. And in Japan, they have a word that translates to forest bathing. And it's the idea that we would go out and spend some time in the forest, soaking up that fresh air and being under the trees. And that's an idea of a sort of therapy for a better life. So let me see here. When we talk about stress with any of us here, we all have stress. I am sure that all of you have been affected by stress, and really if you have family members affected by stress, it's part of our life. But what if you were a person who, when you were affected by stress, it was like 1,000 times more powerful than it is for you or me? A lot of people on the autism spectrum have very, very high sensitivity to things. And I'm just going to preface the rest of this talk by just saying that when we talk about autism, it's important to remember that we are talking about a constellation of symptoms. So anybody here who has a grandkid or a niece or a nephew or a neighbor's friend or someone in their family who's affected by autism, those of us who know that every person is individual and different. And so I'm going to talk about my son, and a lot of his issues and symptoms are common to other people with autism, but any person we talk about is just that one person. That is a very individual, unique thing. So I can't really speak to everyone with autism, but I'll give some examples by talking about my son. But with autism, when they do studies of cortisol levels, much less autism moms, children or people with autism, the stress hormones are, very high. And the other thing that's a big, big issue for my son and many people we know who are dealing with autism spectrum issues is a sensory processing issue where light, sound, taste, smell, touch, and emotions are either extremely overwhelmingly powerful, or in some cases, very, very low. Somebody was talking about their grandson or granddaughter who's got no fear and runs around and doesn't worry about anything. You can have a person who actually doesn't sense danger or doesn't sense certain things, maybe doesn't sense pain. There's a lot of different things that happen where your regulatory system is a little out of whack. So with a person on the spectrum, especially young kids, if we go out and we see a kid who we are thinking is having a tantrum, maybe they're on the ground kicking and yelling and crying, we say, well, look at that kid having a tantrum. And I, frankly, before I had an autistic son, I used to say, geez, why isn't that parent, disciplining that child or helping them behave better? And when you walk into this world of autism, not that any of us choose to walk here, but when you're in here, you realize that what we think of as a tantrum, which has an implication of something negative, that what we're really looking at is what we call meltdowns. And if your sensory system is just so overwhelming that you can't handle the things coming in. You just become overwhelmed. And so the picture at the upper right is Sean. This is Sean in his elementary school days. This is the start of every visit to the San Francisco Zoo. We would go to the zoo, which he knew very well and loved going to, but it would take the first half hour or 40 minutes. First of all, if we could get him through the gate, then, and this is a kid who may have been asking to go to the zoo, but the lights and the sounds and the smells and everything that comes barreling at us and we just handle it, for a kid on the spectrum can be so overwhelming that he would go to the playground. There's a little wooden bridge that you can walk on at the playground. So Sean would go dive in the sand under this little bridge and just kind of like close off from the world for a little bit. And the other photo here is, I don't know if anybody remembers, the Exploratorium used to have a terrific site at a previous location at the Palace of Fine Arts. And when you walked in there, they had this little opening area. And this is again, Sean, at the start of a visit to the Exploratorium, he would spend 20 or 30 minutes just with his face closed off. So one of the things that we don't realize is a person with autism, a typical one with a visual sense, for example, is when we walk into a school classroom or we walk into a store, maybe you're going to Target, maybe you're going to Safeway, and there are fluorescent lights. Those fluorescent lights flicker at a different pace than what we see with our incandescent lights. And the flickering of a fluorescent light, if you are so hypersensitive to things, they actually are seeing that flicker and it becomes overwhelming. So you'll see, people just close their heads or hands over their ears because they're sensing that flickering of the fluorescent lights. So that's just one example of what could be 20 things coming at someone at one time with sensory processing issues. It's a very overwhelming thing. And if they can't speak or explain it, they get frustrated because they don't have the language to tell us what they're feeling. There have been studies done on the brains of autistic people who've passed, autopsies. They find that the section of the brain called the amygdala, which is it's sort of the area that controls fear. It's what triggers our fight or flight instinct. A kid like Sean in these earlier days, he was kicking into fight or flight mode 30 times a day. And if you've ever had that panic mode, you know how exhausting it is to feel that way. Well, Patricia, when you walked into the door, you are knocked back by that. It throws you off even though you walk into the room as if you're going to give your speech, but it throws you off and you have to regroup again to face your next step. And so if you're on the autism spectrum, and everything, sound, sights, everything. My son's afraid of dogs. If he walks on a trail and he's thrown off. Every minute is trying to regroup and take your next step forward. So it's very, very overwhelming. A lot of people on the spectrum have neurological issues. We thought we had dodged that. We said, well, at least Sean doesn't have seizures. Well, when he was 19, he started having major seizures and very quickly found a terrific neurologist. Once he took one anti-seizure medication, he was great, which unfortunately isn't the case for him. But this is another thing. There's a lot of neurological things going on with people that deal with these conditions. And again, every person's unique. There's no universal description. So I'm talking about my son who is so overwhelmed and doesn't have as much spoken language, but there are many, many people who are considered to be on the autism spectrum who are very, very articulate, extremely bright people. My son's a very bright person. He just cannot connect with the world the way everyone else can. But there are a lot of people who actually do have a lot of language ability and still have difficulty in getting beyond these senses of being overwhelmed. So again, this is just sort of an overview, and it really doesn't give a great picture of overall people, but it helps you get to know one family situation. So when your family has a child who drops to the ground every time you walk out the front door, you can become isolated because you can't really join in with other people as easily. And then, so this is a picture of Sean. This was Sean's way of facing the world. Sean wanted to go out and see the world. He wanted to look out at the world, but it was so overwhelming to him. He would pull this little chair up to our front door in the Richmond district, and he would bring a blanket from his bed and he would wrap himself up like a cocoon, and he would have the tiniest little hole that he could just see and just breathe from. And this was his way to look out at the world because it was so overwhelming. It was his buffer. He needed a buffer to be able to face the world. So if this is him when he was younger, just imagine any of us who, we all were teenagers at some point. Some of us have raised teenagers. Maybe some of us were teachers and taught teenagers. The teen years are very tough for anybody. So if that's tough for us, imagine what going through the hormone changes and just the world changing around you the way it does when you're a teen, how it feels for a person who's already so overwhelmed. We started to have even bigger challenges. And Sean had had some bad things happen on his school bus with other autistic kids screaming. The screaming was so loud that it became a PTSD issue where Sean couldn't go on the school bus anymore. He didn't want to go to school because he was afraid he was going to be put on the bus. We were just trapped. So we were really having a lot of issues with just getting Sean at this stage of life to even leave the house. It was a battle every single day. And if your child is a special needs kid, if you're lucky, I'm sure this isn't the case for everybody, but for most of my friends who are special needs parents and families, our kids don't typically get invited to the other kids' birthday parties. You know, if you've got a classroom full of typically developing kids, sometimes the special needs kids aren't invited to those. So we don't have as many opportunities to play with other kids and or interact with our peers. So a group of families here in San Francisco gathered and we set up a little group where we could, it was our little Golden Gate Breakfast Club, but it was our autism family activity group. And so we would have a bowling party, a swimming pool party. We had a bouncy house party. And we used to say, Sean couldn't even do the bouncy house party with the other autistic kids. We just used to say to ourselves, even among the outsiders, we're the outsiders. We were really getting discouraged because we were just, Sean's sensory system was so overwhelmed that we were just having a tough time just getting anywhere. And we were really, so if your child is trapped, you're trapped too. And I'm an outgoing person, used to be a world traveler, lived in Japan for several years, traveled all over the world. I love people. I love to be out in the world. I love to go places. All of that shut down because I have to be there to protect and help my son who is not able to go places. So it's very restricting for everyone in the family, including, I'll mention, siblings of special needs kids. Sean's big brother, who's now in London, lucky him. You know, it was very tough for him growing up because parents spend so much of their time putting out fires with challenging issues that the typically developing kids often get a little bit left by the wayside. So what do you do in this case? You know, you need to find the right help. It was not like we weren't trying. We had spent, you know, just every spare minute, tens of thousands of dollars every year. I mean, we were paying, not that we were rich, but all of my translation money, after I paid the mortgage, we were putting money into therapists. And this is something that you hear about a lot with, especially with autism families, because there are a lot of speech therapy, there's just a million types of therapy that are on offer, but they're all expensive. And we had like the best of the best therapists. We had wonderful people, wonderful teachers. My boys both went to public school. Very appreciative of the public school system that we've had for both my sons, but especially the special ed program. You hear lots of complaints, but we did have some wonderful teachers. So we had great people, but we still were barely getting forward and our world was shrinking down. Sean's world was shrinking. He was losing some development because of not being able to get out. So it escalated to the point that I was trying to get Sean through an intersection and he just froze and hit the ground in the middle of oncoming cars one day in a busy intersection in San Francisco. And I was like, boy, we need, you know, and we sometimes hear, Sean included, some biting and head biting when kids get frustrated. But when your kid's dropping in the middle of traffic in a city intersection, you need help and we need help. And we already had reached out for the best help there was. And people were just not able to really crack that wall that was there. But we, when Sean was in 6th grade, you see pictures of this young man. We called him our autism whisperer, and he was an absolutely brilliant, gifted young special ed teacher. And he had hopped in for the second half of Sean's 6th grade year. Middle school was very, very difficult. And this young teaching assistant was there. And we said, wow, this guy is like painfully shy and quiet, but he seems to have a real sense with the kids. And we could see when he interacted with Sean, this young guy was just painfully shy. It almost hurt to try to talk to him because he was very shy and quiet. But when he worked with the special needs students, it was like magic. He was just amazing. And he was particularly good with Sean, who even the other good teachers were having a hard time getting through to. So we were so pleased to have this young man in Sean's classroom in 6th grade. End of the year, he moves to another school. We lost touch with him. And it was heartbreaking because from that time on, for the next year and a half, my husband and I would sit around and we'd say, gosh, if only we could work with David. I know if we could find David, that Sean would come out of his shell. I know he could make a difference. So a year and a half goes by and it's coming towards the holidays, middle of Sean's 8th grade year. And again, we've had a very tough middle school stretch. We're in the middle of 8th grade thinking, how are we going to survive this, having the dropping in front of traffic? And the phone rings out of the blue. And it's this very deep, calming voice. And this voice says, you probably don't remember me, but this is David. I was Sean's teaching assistant back in 6th grade. I'm like, well, of course we remember you. He goes, well, you know, I went on and I just received my master's in special education and I'm moving on. So I'm going to be able to be a full class teacher. And our family had offered to help him if he had any graduate school projects, that we'd be happy to help if he needed anything. And way back when we were still in touch, we had volunteered to help him for one of his master's program. It was a project he needed to do. So he had appreciated that. And he called us to say, thank you, that he thought we'd helped him get his degree, which we were pleased to hear. But I was like, oh my gosh, don't let this guy go. We've got him now. So I grasped onto this young man and said, please, if you would like a side project on top of whatever teaching you do, could you work with our family with Sean? And he was very pleased to do so. He was just a wonderful young man. So he started working with Sean and he would come every weekend. And the mantra that he had that I remember is this calm, steady voice that says, you can do it, try again. You can do it, try again. And all of those therapists and all of those teachers and all the blood, sweat, and tears that we parents put in, there was something powerful about this calm, quiet young man. He would not give up. He would never, ever, if Sean did not do the thing that he was working towards, he would give him enough chances until he would make that incremental step forward. And Sean would do it. And we just made leaps and bounds of progress with his health. So when we started to work with this young teacher, he asked me, well, what is it that, let's choose an activity that you want to do with your son. What would be most helpful to you? And I thought about it. I said, well, what helped me as a kid? What was the powerful sort of source of solace and uplifting power for me when I was a kid growing up? It was hiking. It was being out in nature. And I thought, well, here we are in San Francisco Bay Area. There are countless stunning places to spend time in nature here in the Bay Area. If you are in a wheelchair, you can still get to that trailhead and sit and look at the scenery. If you're able-bodied and can take an easy walk, you do that. If you're like Sean's disability is not physical, he can climb Mount Tam like a mountain goat now that he's gotten out to do it. But I thought hiking would be the thing. And so the young teacher, David, says, okay, we're going to do hiking. And he was just determined we were going to do that. So it would get us out of the house, would be in a calm, natural environment. There'd be fewer harsh sensory inputs, and it would be beneficial to us parents. So we worked on that. And the photo you see here is a very iconic day for me. This was Mother's Day of the year that we were working with David. And I had this dream of going to Kirby Cove. Now, Kirby Cove is just the Marin side of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's not far away. It's not a particularly long hike. It's steep, but it's short. You can get to this place. It's easy to drive to, not easy to park. But anyways, it's not such a far away place. But for me, it became this iconic dream that if I could get Sean to go to a new place that even I haven't been to before, this would be a miracle. We're going to have this view of the bridge. Well, in a very short time from trapped at home, our gifted young teacher, David, we got there. Sean and David and I got to Kirby Cove on a Mother's Day, and I rank it with the top 3 days of my life: wedding day, birth of my first child, and this Mother's Day at Kirby Cove, because it represented to me that, and it felt like a miracle. It represented to me that we could do new things and that we were going to make progress. So again, I am not particularly religious, but I always tell people, if ever there was a sense that the powers that be someplace had sent an angel to our family, it was this young teacher. He was just brilliant and so gifted, and he just changed our lives very quickly. So we were making all this remarkable progress in over a short time. And this teacher, David, would show up on the dot, 1 p.m. every Sunday. He would show up week after week without fail, to the minute. He would show up to go on an outing with Sean. And one day he did not show up. And I just said, something has happened, because we know this young man. He's so dedicated and devoted. He's so polite and courteous and prompt. And if he didn't call, he's either in the hospital or he's dead. And he was dead. It was absolutely the most devastating thing that happened to me as a mom, because not only had this young man, he felt like a younger brother or a son to me, and he, you know, felt like an extra son to my husband as well. But this athletic young guy was felled by what we often read in news stories about, you know, football players or basketball players who suddenly drop, it collapse on the football field or the basketball court. He'd had one of those undetected heart situations that fells athletic young men, because they're so hard to detect. Nobody knows it until it gets them. So our wonderful teacher suddenly passed away, and of everybody, I think I was the most devastated, because this young man, not only was he like a family member to us, but he was so amazing that he embodied my sense of hope, not only for Sean, but I felt that this young man had a lot to offer to the broader special needs world, and that we needed to write a book about his sort of thoughts and techniques that he was using with Sean, because he was just remarkable. Well, you can't just stop when bad things happen. Someone passes away. You know, we've heard multiple times this morning people announcing the passing of someone or a memorial service. These are the hardest things we go through, but we have to somehow pick ourselves up and keep putting that foot forward again. And so we knew that David would not have wanted us to stop. So we reached out into the autism community and asked people to introduce us to any helpers they thought there might be. And we found a couple of terrific people who we still are in contact today. This was years ago. But one of the helpers that we were introduced to was a young guy who was very good at taking special needs kids on outdoor activities. So there we were, from the help with David, getting Sean out and going to Kirby Cove and hiking on the local trails. But then the new helper got Sean out there, hiking Mount Tam. We've been up half the trails on Mount Tam, which is saying something, because there are a lot of trails and all around the peninsula and around Northern California. We got him to try kayaking, swimming, tandem bicycle, indoor and outdoor rock climbing, and something that's tough. I mean, all of you guys are great travelers. You have that opportunity to go places and do things and see people. That's something that, as the kind of person I am, I would have been the mom that was taking my kids on international trips. I can't do that. My husband's Japanese. We would have been traveling to visit family in Japan. My older brother lives in England. We would have been taking them to visit England. We couldn't go on an overnight trip, you know, to Daly City. we could not go. It was just very challenging. But this new outdoor helper said, you know, your family needs to learn how to go on a family vacation. And he helped us find the ability to even do overnight cabin stays, which again, for an autistic person, sleeping in a different place, using a different bathroom, all those things are overwhelming. But here's Sean and his big brother and his dad in a snowstorm in April in Yosemite at the top of a hike trail. So, you know, we are very grateful for the help we did receive for the other helpers that we've carried on. But I would say nature was a big part of that, because the sensory even though wind and cold and heat and rain and snow, all those things can affect us, somehow that sort of sensory input becomes a little bit more predictable or a little bit more handleable. Somehow those things were easier for Sean to digest, and it, by learning to be outdoors more easily, he became more able to spend time in indoor settings like restaurants or stores or school. So anyways, that was such a big help to us that I decided I would like to give back in some way. And so I thought, gosh, we've been on all these hikes, and I kept a photo archive of everything. And so I created hikingautism.com back in 2018. And at this point, I'm up to 163 hike listings, and we've done many more than that, but that's as many as I've been able to post. This week will be 164. This week's is going to be an interesting one because we went off trail on Mount Tam this week, so it'll be a fun one. But there are trails and hikes from easy walks in San Francisco parks. It includes San Francisco stair walks. It includes just a vista place for someone who might not feel they can get up and walk around. You could just go enjoy a beautiful view, but it also includes challenging hikes and easy walks. So I put the hike posts there, but I also have every week I put out what I call my little insights post, and it's just an uplifting message. And I always like to say that because our activity was hiking and our challenge was autism, I called the website Hiking Autism. But what it really should be called is Nature for Life Challenges, because my weekly insights posts are really geared for any person on this earth dealing with any kind of life challenge, because I feel that all of us have a lot more difficult things going on in our lives than we often reveal to others. And so I always think, well, my life is pretty hard and I can open up and talk about it. And it's a chance for me to tell other people, you're not alone. Other people have difficult things. And if you don't want to say it out loud, I'll say it for you. And here's a little uplifting thing you can do to make your day a little bit better. And that's what I hope that people get when they read those. By putting out the website, I had the very nice opportunity of being approached by somebody from the Autism Society. And we're when we talk about autism, people always make the joke about trying to herd cats because you can't herd cats. And so when I talk about any kind of group, we're a loosely tied bunch of people, and it's some of us, it is very hard to get us under any semblance of organization because we are so isolated. It's a very isolating situation to be in. But there's the Autism Society, and there's a Facebook group where we try to post activities. Like, it's very great for me to hear that you guys organize walks for people to join in on. It's what a terrific activity to get together, take a little walk, maybe go have a cup of coffee. So we try to do that. So every month through the Autism Society, I lead other families on hikes, and it's a very gratifying, nice thing for me because I see kids who are as overwhelmed as Sean was, and I can put my hand over that mom's or dad's shoulder and say, come on, try again, you can do it, try again, and get people up and moving. And families are grateful. We're grateful to see them. I'm also working on a book that tells our story and also tries to just share the thoughts about, how beneficial it is to spend time in nature, that helps all of us. So the photo here on the lower left is the Tennessee Point Labyrinth, which is in Marin County. It's a little bit below the Battery Townsley. It's just up over the ridge from Rodeo Beach Lagoon. So anybody that knows Marin, you might be familiar with Rodeo Beach, and there's a lot of hill walks over there, but this was hidden to us for many years. We only discovered this in the last 2 or 3 years. And once I posted this, I see this come up very high on my post listings. I think a lot of people, because it's not really listed in other hike sites. It's quite an easy walk, relatively easy walk, and it's this amazing, stunning place. So we got our group to go do this walk, which was nice to get some families out there. But I notice a lot of people seem to tap in to be able to try to find their way to this location. And the other photo here you see, that's me that's my uniform. As I'm not usually wearing makeup and earrings, trying to match the ladies of the Breakfast Club by putting some makeup on at 7 in the morning. Very impressive group. But that's me in the denim. Is backpack and hiking boots are my uniform. That's what I live in. But you'll see a National Park Ranger here with the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. somehow I think the National Park Service decided that they really needed to do outreach to other members of the community, whether it was areas of the city that didn't have as much access to nature or didn't have sort of the impetus to go places, or it was special needs communities. So the National Park Service contacted us, and this is terrific. They're doing these outreach programs where one of the rangers here gave our families, we organized a date, they gave our families a tour with historical stops and spots at Chrissy Field in the Presidio. And we have another one coming up. They're very highly booked now because of Tunnel Tops is a new location to open in the Presidio. But we have another date with a ranger going to help us. So it's been a great thing. Me going through this with my family has allowed me to try to reach out and reach back to others. And it lifts me up to do that. And then I see other people reaching out to us. So it's just been a very, despite the challenges in life, which is what I try to share with people, is life is challenging, but we just have to keep getting up and going. And the last quick flipping back to the idea about stress is, as I've gone through this, I've seen, the importance of finding a way to make this even a small part of our life any way we can. Maybe you have mobility issues. I just visited my dad for the first time in 5 years. He's the man who taught me how to hike, camp, build a fire, ride a bike, my dad helped me learn how to enjoy the outdoors, but right now he's pretty much limited to his chair in front of the big picture window where the TV is. And I was like, well, my dad is enjoying this view from the window. We can all enjoy a view from the window, whatever our logistical issues are, finances. Not everybody has a car to go jump and drive across the Golden Gate Bridge. Not everyone has that ability. We take it for granted that we have those resources. Not everyone does. And there may not be a bus to the place that is a stunning hiking site, but there is always something someplace. I'm just going to flip over to the very right side image here. There's a book here that says Finding Easy Walks Wherever You Are. Through my social media, talking, with hikingautism.com, I met this woman and sort of befriended this woman named Marjorie Turner. And I think her books are self-published, but she has a series of them. She's in New England. She's in the East Coast. Marjorie had a major health crisis that left her partially paralyzed. And she used to love being outdoors. She has kids, she has grandkids, but midlife, she had this really devastating thing happen where she is not able to walk freely or easily as she is. She's worked very hard over years to be able to keep getting out and getting outdoors. Is she created her series of websites and books about finding easy walks. And I realized, for her, an easy walk means a relatively flat trail that doesn't have rocks or roots to trip over, because maybe she's using a cane or a wheelchair or a modified bicycle or something. An easy walk for her is different for an easy walk for my son. Sean could be a mountain goat hiking the steepest trail on Mount Tam. What he can't handle is loud traffic noises. And he can't handle dogs running free on a trail because he's afraid of dogs. That's another common thing with a lot of people. So what makes an easy trail or an easy way to get outdoors is different for all of us. So we need to figure out what works for us and try to do that. And again, just in appreciation of one of the researchers from the book about the telomeres, this Alyssa Epple, who again, she's right here at UCSF. She's I think she does talks as well. She has a lot of very interesting information. She's right here at UCSF. So Alyssa Epple has a book coming up, and I connected with her on social media and said, I'll pre-order your book. And she says, Lisa, chapter 5 is about nature, getting out in nature as one of the things that we can most powerfully do to help with stress. So my ultimate message, which it goes on repeat in some of my insights posts, is stand at your door and watch the sunrise. Well, you Golden Gate Breakfast Clubbers can watch the sunrise. Most of the rest of everybody's watching the sunset. You guys are the early risers, but stand at your door or your window and look at the sunrise or the sunset. When you're walking down your city street or your suburban street or your wherever, look for flowers that are growing up through the sidewalk. If you don't have a space to make a little garden, find what's there in front of you. If you're stuck in your home and you have a window that you can sit by, watch the birds fly by, watch the spider building a web in the corner. there is some small dose of nature that'll give us a lift someplace. And I just really live by that because I do still live a stressful life and I need this for myself. So I like to share it with others. So I'll just close. This is me and Shawnee. This is Point Reyes, way out at the far end where the Thule elk walk around. And I often, not every week, but I often end my insights post saying, just keep putting one foot forward, because as I'm sure every person at this meeting has experienced, we have all had at least one, if not several things in our lives that have literally knocked us off our feet, that have made us feel like, can I get up and face the day in the morning? I am sure most of us try to forget those because they're painful to remember. But if we've lost a loved one, have a devastating thing, lose a job, whatever it might be. So I think to myself, what do we have to do? We have to wake up and we have to get to the side of the bed and put our feet on that floor and stand up, and you put the first foot out. And then you put the next foot out and you find a way to walk through your day, no matter how hard it is. We find a way. And so I encouragingly, with my exclamation point, my cheerful way, say, keep putting one foot forward. It's worth it to just keep trying. So thank you very much. I am going to stop blathering on here, and I'm going to try to stop my share. And so I'm going to stop my share and hand it back to whatever happens now. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. That was amazing. Susan, Roanne, and I have some more. I'm sure Susan was feeling like me. Hey, we are going on that walk together.